I'm Connor Old, and this is Old Oscar Countdown. And today we're going to be looking at the best cinematography category. So guys, welcome back. If you're new to the channel, essentially every week I go to different categories and soon to be going through different combining categories for my predictions for the Oscar nominations of 2017. I'm having a blast so far. I can't believe we've gone by so quick and gone through a lot of the major categories. And so if you're new, subscribe to the channel, maybe look at the past other videos. If you're not, welcome back. I'd love to have a thriving community, and please comment below. I love reading comments. I almost always answer back, and I just love that interaction. And today is cinematography, which should be a pretty easy one, I think, to predict. But in terms of the winner, it might be a little bit harder. We'll see right now, though. And I think some key things, whether it's digital or film, depending on what they shoot on, that may be the key to winning this year's Oscar and leaning towards film instead of digital, which is a good thing if you ask me, in terms of guys like Christopher Nolan and Martin Scorsese have been such proponents of shooting on film and film preservation. So it's good to see that a lot of these films are shot on film and that that medium is still thriving, because it does give it a unique layer to it, which I will be talking on later. And another last housekeeping thing, so essentially I'm going to redo my picks in one giant episode of Old Oscar Countdown, and where I sort of update my picks, because I did Best Picture back in October, right before the nominations. I think like a day or two at most. Like it's going to be right before it. I'm going to read through all my nominations, say why I may have changed some things. Most of them will sort of stay the way they are, but something like Best Picture or Best Actor have changed because we've seen SAGs and Golden Globes. So before the Oscar nominations, I will give my updated list. But then after that, I'll go into Oscars for after the nominations have been announced, of course. But right now, we're looking at Best Cinematography. I'm going to read off the entire list of my definites and then my possibles, and then I'll talk about each one in depth. So the first one is La La Land, DP, Alina Sandgren. Arrival, Bradford Young. Silence, Rodrigo Pietro. Moonlight, James Laxton. And Jackie, Stefan Fontaine. And my possibles, Hacksaw Ridge, Simon Duggan. And Live by Night, Robert Richardson. So it's going to go with the first one, La La Land, Linus Sandgren. Some of his other movies he's done are recent stuff with David O. Russell, so American Hustle and Joy. And so far from the movies I've seen, this is my favorite cinematography. It does such a great job of, like I said, blending that sort of old-timey and that modern reality, and sort of keeping almost in a reality and a dream-like, because musicals are so good at sort of going back and forth between the music and the talking, that some people, it takes them out of it. This one, I think for almost everybody, it just encapsulates you in that world, and it's just so beautiful, the cinematography. I really like the use of color. There's very bright, vibrant colors, and use of shadows, especially lighting up the Los Angeles skyline, especially in the Los Angeles skyline scene, the tap dance number that everyone will recognize once you see the movie. One of my favorite shot scenes of the year, with just the one street light using as a light, and then the skyline behind at night, so beautifully lit. One other thing I realized about the cinematography is that this was actually shot in golden hour or magic hour, and if you don't know, this is about the period right before, I would get these two mixed up, like right before sunrise. There's this sort of in-between period, because I can't speak too highly because I'm not a cinematographer, but for the minimum stuff that I know is that depending on how the sun is, depending on what time of day, it can affect the light. So there's this golden hour that they both use for The Revenant that gives just perfect natural lighting to the setting. So essentially, something for musicals is just so hard to do. It's they prep for the entire day, and then they wait for this 1 hour period, essentially, to shoot and do all their time there, because they want to use natural light, and the sun does not change as much, and they always have to rearrange lighting. Because that's an interesting thing that I found out when learning about movies throughout my years, is that lighting, why do movies take so long? You know what I mean? You just take a camera and shoot, and there you go, you're done. Well, a lot of it is preparation, of course, but a lot of it is lighting. Cinematographer is the first one to show up, and his assistants, and they figure out the lighting. That's why people think in movies, a lot of times there's multiple cameras. Not necessarily. A lot of times there's just one camera, and sometimes like 2 cameras is a lot, and 3 is insane, because lighting is just so difficult. They'll do different shots, of course, but they'll do one scene, and then they'll have to light it in. Oh, well, let's cut for break, and then they go move the camera and they light it a different way. But that takes a while, and it's very precise. And The director and the DP, director of photography, or the cinematographer, has to really look at that and figure out how the lighting works. So it's very interesting to see La La Land use that golden hour, that magic hour, like The Revenant last year, which did win Best Cinematography. So I think this one right now is my lead, but I haven't seen things like Arrival and Silence. So I'll talk about that next, speaking of which is my next one, Arrival. This is Bradford Young. He did Selma and A Most Violent Year. I thought A Most Violent Year was beautifully shot, just the New York sort of snow, sort of fit that tone super well. I thought Selma was really done well too. And I forget, but I was reading something that an African American cinematographer has not won in like a long while, or maybe even nominated in a long while. Just a weird sort of thing that happens. But I think Bradford Young's going to get in there. From what I've heard from Arrival, and what I think is that it's just sort of cerebral, and the images are just like, unlike La La Land where it's dreamlike, this is more, it's definitely got that grittiness in the reality, but it is aliens. It takes that sci-fi-ness in terms of saying, oh, this is sci-fi that actually makes sense, but also making it seem like this extraterrestrial thing. And that transition between the scenes with Amy Adams and the aliens trying to communicate them and her prepping is two different things. Plus the tension that's in the movie, I think he does a really good job at shooting it. And I believe this one was shot on digital, which I think like sort of fits the movie right, especially it's sort of a futuristic movie because aliens are not here yet. But I think Bradford Young did an amazing job on it, beautiful cinematography, and I just think that it was a really good job and probably the best digital shot movie I've seen all year. My next one is Silence from Rodrigo Pietro. This is he also did Argo and Wolf of Wall Street. This is his second collaboration with Martin Scorsese, obviously the first one being Wolf of Wall Street. And Martin Scorsese doesn't have unnecessary one cinematographer. He goes back and forth with a lot of people. But in their talks at the beginning, they decided to shoot on a film because Scorsese is such a proponent of film preservation, and it works with the movie. I haven't seen it yet, but in terms of the naturalistic sort of foliage-looking atmosphere of the movie, they want to keep it natural. But an interesting point is that they did film on the day scenes, but at night they did digital. And they also used, another tidbit is they used torches, so you use the firelight to highlight their faces, because a lot of the movie is some sort of like running away from the Japanese, because they're Jesuit priests in Japan, and the Portuguese to be specific. And they use that firelight sort of to run around at night in the forest, give that tension sort of feel to it, but they felt that digital sort of enhanced their faces really well. And in terms of just how the shots look, because this is a religious movie, specifically a Christian movie, they decided to look at a lot of religious paintings and a lot of religious imagery, not necessarily to do a Mel Gibson Passion of the Christ version where it's like very much in your face, I'd say. I think they did a great job with Hacksaw Ridge where it wasn't too much in his face and wasn't too much imposing the values on it. I haven't seen Silence that well, but from what I've heard is that cinematography and the direction from Scorsese is really maybe the best part. Great acting, that's why Scorsese is director, and I actually have him in my nominations. But just heard just amazing things about how it looks, and using those paintings to replicate religious paintings into the movie. And it's a 2-hour and 40-minute movie. It's really long, so and having like every image means something is really interesting, because that's what Martin Scorsese was saying about why he doesn't like older movies, or no, newer movies, sorry, is because the images don't mean anything. So I think he really tried to focus on this one with Rodrigo Pietro. With Wolf of Wall Street, I didn't think I had amazing cinematography, but this one definitely seems to have that vibe for sure. My next one here is Moonlight from James Laxton, and he's a new cinematographer, I'd say. He did Barry Jenkins' last film, Medicine for Melancholy, but he's relatively new, but he's worked with Barry Jenkins before, and I think this is really a beautiful film. Just the way how they transition between the ages. Most of the time is he puts his head in a sink with full of ice and then lifts up, and he's a different age. And it's really interesting just the shots like that, where really convey what the character's thinking without dialogue. They really did a good job. All the actors actually showing their faces, but how they shot the movies. They also do a really interesting thing where he spins the camera spins multiple times. It almost makes you get dizzy. That's what my mom was saying when I saw it with her, because I saw Moonlight with her at TIFF. And she said she almost got dizzy at those scenes, but it was really interesting to sort of see that circle of life, and almost what the movie's about is how people impact this boy's life and how he goes up in the future. and sort of that subdued feeling where you have those feelings, but you can't really express them. That's sort of a theme of the movie. So using the cinematography and tricks like that to sort of keep it in the circle of life, I thought was very interesting in terms of not birth of a nation symbolism, whereas I felt a little bit forced and down your throat. Like, oh my God, this is a metaphor. Moonlight was a little more subtle, and the better for it, if you ask me. Now, my last one here is Jackie from Stéphane Fontaine. He also had a great year this year with Elle and Captain Fantastic. I've not seen Elle, but Captain Fantastic was really great, and he did a good job on that for sure, capturing that sort of commercialized world they see it versus the outside living off the grid in the Washington State woods. But we're talking about Jackie here, and from what I've heard is that I'm going to use Chris Stuckman, another YouTube reviewer. I love his channel. He seems like a great guy, and from what he says, that it could get nominated for an Oscar, but he just felt that it was almost not there. It wasn't noticeable. Which sometimes you want to see the Revenant where it's like, oh my God, this beautiful long take or this handheld. It's just, it sometimes for people it takes them out of the movie. I like it personally because you get that sort of technical thing inside to it. But I also like movies like this, which seems like to be Jackie, where it's essentially also shot on film, and Moonlight was on digital. Sorry, I forgot to mention that. So Jackie also shot on film. Seems like it's not noticed. It wants to get captured and sort of transferred into that period of time, which I think really services the movie properly, just getting transported and not being too flashy, very sort of setting up the camera, I'd say, David Fincher style, where he doesn't do a lot of camera movements, a lot of tripods cutting back and forth sort of, excuse me, scenarios. And what I also think is that I was reading about how she gets more and more distressed after the assassination of her husband. The camera comes in closer and closer, so you can see with that beautiful performance from Natalie Portman and Jackie. It's just you can see as the film goes along, more distressed. The camera gets closer to sort of make you feel like encapsulated. Another thing that we saw with 12 Angry Men, where at the beginning they shot from up top to make the room feel more open, but by the end, as they got more swaggier and things got more intense, they shot from lower, so to make this room feel smaller. I feel like they did the same thing with Jackie, and also incorporating the White House into it. It's really interesting. And then for my possibles, I have Hacksaw Ridge, Simon Duggan, who also did The Great Gatsby. He is pretty unknown for me. I never really heard of him, but The Great Gatsby I thought was really beautifully shot. And for this one, Hacksaw Ridge, Mel Gibson knows how to direct action. The first half of the movie was sort of lifetimey. I didn't enjoy that much, although it was sweet. But the second half of the movie, so real and gritty. Great job of showing that transformation of, oh, I want to be in war, and then you're in war, and you have to show up and do your thing because it's so intense. So we've seen stuff like Saving Private Ryan. Because the war scenes, I recently saw Star Wars Rogue One, which had amazing war scenes, but Hacksaw Ridge had better war scenes, and Gibson knows how to direct action, but also Simon Duggan knows how to shoot action. And just an amazing shots, getting that grittiness and sort of that transfer between the first half of the movie, which is lifetimey, and the second half, which is so gritty and warlike, really, and real and intense. And I think he really did a great job at making sure there's the two different styles to show his versatility really across the movie. I don't think it's going to get nominated though, because Hacksaw Ridge right now is like a 7-8 movie for me in terms of Best Picture. Garfield I think is going to get in for Best Actor, but it's hard to say necessarily if it's going to get in some of the other categories aside from like sound mixing and sound editing. But it could if it gets in score and then cinematography. But I don't think so. I think cinematography right now is pretty locked with between the five that I chose. And the last one here is Live by Night. Now, Live by Night is a really interesting one. Oh, by Robert Richardson. He's mostly known for Tarantino movies, and it's a really interesting one for me because Ben Affleck's movies have been so great, and people have been doubting him because from what I've heard is that Live by Night isn't really hitting. Things like Gold and The Founder and Billy Lynn's Long Halftime Walk and Live by Night seems that they should do well, but I haven't been getting this amazing critical response. But then movies like Hidden Figures could get in. I don't know, it's sort of difficult for me to judge that. I haven't seen the quality of the movies yet, but sometimes they get in, sometimes they don't, just depending on the movie and the release dates, especially something like Founder where why don't you just throw it on the wall and hope it sticks, but it probably won't. And Robert Richardson, I think Live by Night could get in something like sound mixing or sound editing, and maybe cinematography, but right now I'm having it. I don't think getting one nomination, maybe one, but I don't think at all. Could get those below the line categories, so not the acting and writing, but the below the line, so cinematography, sound, score, stuff like that. And Robert Richardson does a great job with Tarantino's movies, so it'll be interesting to see if he gets nominated, but I don't think so right now. But it's possible. It's possible. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Come back for next week where I think we'll be doing production design, costume design, makeup, and hairstyling. And until next time, stay tuned.